Hello everyone, this is Papakirk here. Today, for my scenario project, we are going to talk about the science of happiness. By me, of course. So, with that in mind, let's first get a good baseline on what happiness is. Happiness is the state or emotion of joy or contentness with oneself and life. So, to talk about the science of that, we're mostly going to talk about the brain. This big purple mass at the right side of your screen. Happiness would not be possible without the brain, of course. Everything from dopamine to serotonin, synapses that help with memory. It processes information and holds the reward system, which unlocks the potential of happiness in the first place. We will talk about the reward system later. But for right now, let's talk about the hippocampus and memory. The reward system, and thus happiness, which derives from the reward system, heavily rely on the brain's memory. The hippocampus is the most substantial memory system the brain has. It is made up of synapses, which are important to talk about later, that are strands of brain cells that create loops and act as memories. Hippocampus is responsible for making and storing memories that the brain can use later. And the hippocampus heavily relies on dopamine and serotonin, which I'm pretty sure you've heard of dopamine before, is the happiness chemical that most of you know. But however, not many people know serotonin, because dopamine usually gets all the credit. Now, dopamine, which is CH, H11, NO2, and serotonin, C10, H12, and 2O, are the chemicals most related to happiness within our bodies. Now, dopamine is made in substantia nigra and the ventral tegmental parts of the brain. The substantia nigra is a part of the brain that's just a darkened flesh color, or of the pink color that the brain already is. And those two create dopamine. It contributes heavily to movement and fine motor skills. This is also why people who have a lack of dopamine tend to shake, like with Parkinson's disease. Serotonin is produced in your intestines. Serotonin actually helps with happiness more than dopamine, even though dopamine gets more credit for problems with happiness than serotonin. Either way, both chemicals help with memory. Yes, memory. Neither of them directly affect happiness. Instead, they reinforce synapses, which hold positive or negative memories. Which, of course, you probably know which are just loops of cells. Dopamine and serotonin help to reinforce the connections between these cells and to thus reaffirmate a memory, whether it be positive or negative, which the brain perceives as happiness. This is how the reward system works, and it's also why we remember a happy memory. When we remember a happy memory, we become happy. When we remember make a new positive memory, we also experience joy, because the dopamine helps in the first place to create the memory. So happiness isn't so much physically an emotion, rather, it is a positive memory or stimuli, which is completely back related to the reward system, which is the whole shebang of this. Now then, processing emotion. Two main parts of the brain that handle reward and punishment are the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, which you may have heard of before. It helps with judgment and coordinating actions. The prefrontal cortex is used to make decisions by the brain. It is near the front part of the brain, as the name implies. The amygdala, however, is directly responsible for handling reward and punishment, receiving signals from different parts of the body when positive or negative stimuli occur. For example, if your tongue senses something, it'll send it directly to the amygdala, and the amygdala will process if it is a positive or a negative memory. This could also be, for example, if you stub your toe, that's clearly a negative stimuli, which the amygdala will take that, and it'll be like, yeah, this is a negative emotion. So that'll send that prefrontal cortex, and it takes care of everything else. Also handles where they occur and why, which is also a bit related to visual, hearing, and touch. Did you know that different people handle reward and punishment differently? This is due to genetics, which just so happens to be the next slide. Basically, some people prefer or remember things better from reward, than punishment, and other people remember things better from punishment than reward. It's all about where the dopamine goes. Now we're talking about the genetics of happiness. Based on unique studies of twins, science has found that only 50% of your happiness is genetic. Yes, genetics affect things like levels of dopamine and serotonin in the brain. Now, this number may seem high, but it is really not that much. That means that 50% exists that you can control. This 50% is further divided into 10% coming from the circumstances you live in, and the rest of the 40% comes from reactions, thoughts, and feelings. As well as this, other studies also concur that the 50%, 40%, and 10% are mixed together, because in certain scenarios, your thoughts and feelings may change your circumstances, or your genetics may affect your circumstances. This means that the lines of the graph are blurred more than you think. So, perhaps instead of having a completely irregular pie chart as we have here, perhaps the colors would be a bit more blended together. Basically, what this tells us is that we have control over our emotions. That's why sometimes you'll hear about genetic depression, which is depression that comes from your genes, how you're made as a person. Sometimes people get depressed just because of their genetics, which is sad, very sad, but it exists, and this is partially why. That's also why some people are very happy over others. And now, let's talk about things that affect happiness. External factors that the brain has no control. Actually, it has control over how it processes it, but not how it happens. So, tendencies of happiness. If we really want to get a good idea of what happiness is, what we need to first see what happy people do, why they do it, and how it affects them. There are actually things that happy people do to be happy, which most of these things, activities, are in reality simply habits, because happy people truly do not need to get money, or promotion, or even anything that valuable in order to maintain a happy life. Some people are simply happy because they're content with where they are, which is a pretty good thing for some people. And for others, it's worse. This has even been backed by scientific research. Anyways, happy people tend to regularly do exercise, they slow down to enjoy life sometimes, they spend money on other people, they have good friends, they constantly stay positive, they get enough sleep, I don't, they have deep conversations, they help others, they make efforts to be happy, and have a growth mindset. All of these things are surprisingly easy to do, yet most people simply choose not to, even if humans are supposed to be social creatures, interacting with one another and processing emotions on a deeper level. Which is one of the best things that you can do if you are depressed. Talking to other people is one of the best ways to handle depression. Fun fact. Anyways, colors. Yes, colors. It may seem hard to believe that a simple color can have an effect on people, but this has actually shown physical and mental effects, in some cases, enough for science to study and examine different colors. Now, the golden rule here is that most people will have the same effects from colors because most cultures and individuals have the same views of all the colors since their creation. However, certain cultures, and more importantly, certain negative or positive stimuli from individuals about colors will take heavily into account for all colors. So take these all with a grain of salt. So for example, if someone has had a negative emotion or memory with the color green, then we might not think the same thing as the color green as most people. Now then, that's colorful. Let's go from the left to the right. Red, the most vivid of all colors, and disrupts the most emotion. Creates love, passion, anger, power, and anger. And common physical reactions, which is unique to red. You have more energy, elevated blood pressure, and increased heart rate. This is actually why some restaurants color their walls red, because it slightly increases your metabolism with everything happening here. I mean, it's not that much noticeable difference, but it's just enough to make it reasonable. Orange. Strong and energetic, similar to red. You love it or you hate it. Everyone either loves the color orange or they hate the color orange for some reason. So, since this happens, it creates immediate mental reactions, which may include excitement, enthusiasm, or warmth, maybe disgust if you hate it. Yellow makes strong feelings, as with most warm colors. Red, orange, yellow all sprout strong feelings. Yellow creates warmth, brightness, energy, and attention, which is why yellow may be used in advertising a lot, because it draws attention to a certain area. Toned down yellow, or pale yellow, can also cause calmness in some people. Yellow is also more complex than other colors, and it is prone to different meanings. So, for example, these are all the most common traits of yellow, but there may be other reasons or effects that the color yellow may have on different individuals. Now, the color green, which is probably the best color for happiness. It is very similar and reminds people of nature. It creates happiness, memories of nature, and it creates calmness, which can also reduce stress. Bright green can also cause feelings of energy and excitement, which is why some people actually like different shades of green, because different shades of green actually have different effects on people, and they have different reminders of certain things. Now, blue, the most basic color for favorite colors. A lot of people like the color blue for some reason. And it's just basic overall, so it creates sadness, calmness, and productivity. It is seen as one of the most traditional colors. Now let's move on to the most complex color, one of the least mentally affecting colors available. It creates intrigue towards the color, and it creates a mystery of the color. It has almost no real mental effect. However, purple stands out as one of the most mysterious colors because of this. It's because of its strange qualities. It's just there. It's imposing, almost imposing. Not really imposing. It doesn't create thoughts of malice, but it creates thoughts of question and mystery, perhaps. Now, the effects of cyanide on happiness. Now, this is peak content with a capital P-A-E-K. Cyanide, chemical formula is nitrogen and carbon, triple bonded, along with either one hydrogen molecule, one potassium molecule, one sodium molecule, or one chlorine molecule. It is a depressant. It covers up the number 1 and number 2 dopamine receptors, which dopamine receptors simply receive dopamine within the brain, and they send it to the hippocampus. They cover up the 1 and 2 dopamine receptors, thus not allowing as much dopamine to be used for happiness. They also decrease the general level of dopamine in the body. Now, the only problem with cyanide being a depressant is that just 2.5 milligrams of it kills you in 5 minutes or less. It takes at least 15 minutes to activate the depressant stage, which 5 minutes does not allow the proper bond to take place in order for it to act as a depressant. However, if given enough time, 15 minutes at least, requiring an exceptionally small amount of cyanide, which would be probably less than 1 milligram, it can still act as a depressant, even lowering the amount of dopamine in the striatum, which is a container of dopamine. There is a note that sodium cyanide, which is the NCNA form of cyanide, is absolute crap for these effects. It's the only type of the 4 cyanides that we have listed that have almost no effect as a depressant. So, as long as it isn't sodium cyanide, it is a semi-strong depressant. Sadly, all 4 of them are deadly. In conclusion, what is the science of happiness? Like most things, the science of happiness is complex. And when you even start to think about its interactions with other feelings, it gets even harder to figure out. However, science is well on its way to figuring out the brain. The science of happiness, or more accurately, the science of the brain in general, is called psychology. While psychology may still be ages away from discovering the true science of happiness, it still knows that happiness is a positive feeling that can come from many places. Who knows, we may know that happiness is actually a bad thing sometimes, but you should let feelings be known instead of trying to mask it by being happy. Until then, of course, this is what I've gathered about the science of happiness. and the brain, and everything else we've talked about today. Now, if you have enjoyed this small little video about basic happiness, then I was actually inspired to create this video by a small little YouTube channel called Psych to Go. So I have watched Psych to Go for almost a year now, and a lot of their content is just incredible. I love it, and I thought that since I've been watching a lot of Psych to Go, I wanted to create a scenario on the psychology of happiness, because happiness is one of the weirdest parts of the brain that I've never gotten the hold of. Like, we all know that dopamine and serotonin cause happiness, but like, what is happiness then? Like mentally, we know what happiness is, but like physically, do we know what happiness is? So I was intrigued by the science, and I thought that it relates somewhat to a mental state. So I thought it'd be a pretty good mix of science and mental stuff. So this is how I got into it. And please watch Psych to Go. It's a really great channel. If you've enjoyed this video, well, you're gonna enjoy there's a lot more, because one, they're better. Two, they're better. And three, well, they're more scientific. All right. Thank you very much, and I will see you later. Thank you, sirs and ma'ams.